This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.
Hi there, welcome to Doc Talk. As you know, Doc Talk is the podcast that Knoxville Academy of Medicine produces to help understand health issues in plain language. I'm Elise Denenny, former president of Knoxville Academy of Medicine, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today to talk about a health issue that we're going to talk about. I'd like to welcome to our podcast this morning Dr. Josh Gapp, who is a dermatopathologist in Knoxville. Now, incidentally, not only is he a dermatopathologist, but he's also very conversant in health issues because he is a candidate for the U.S. Senate. As you know, Senator Alexander is retiring this year, and Dr. Gapp, we are privileged to know, is running for that position. So, welcome, Dr. Gapp.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So nice to see you. Are we talking about skin cancer today?
Yeah, I think that's the topic.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna let you have the floor.
Okay.
You're gonna have to get used to hearing that said. The floor is yours. What would you like to talk about as far as skin cancer?
Skin cancer is, first of all, it's the number one cancer. More people get skin cancer than get any other cancer, at least in the United States, I think worldwide too. I think the statistics are 1 in 5 Americans are going to have skin cancer in their lifetime. So it's if it's not going to affect you, it's probably going to affect somebody that you know, and it's important. Cancer is a bad word. Nobody likes the word cancer, and rightfully so. It's earned its moniker. But cancer is just a term for cells that grow out of control. They lose their stop signal, and so they just kind of keep on growing. But there's all sorts of cells in the body, and so we have all sorts of cancers. Skin cancer just happens to be one, and even in skin cancer, it's a broad category. So to say skin cancer, means that the cancer's in your skin, but even within skin cancer, there's a bunch of different types of skin cancer, and it's important to know the differences between the types, because some are very, very treatable, and some are very deadly. And the sooner, and with all of them, the sooner you catch them, the better your outcome. And so I kind of think it's important.
Well, I love that you said that there are so many different kinds of skin cancer. We are so lucky today because a dermatopathologist is a very specific kind of physician. They have the privilege of seeing exactly underneath the microscope what is going on with the little piece of cancer that your doctor has taken, and it's called a biopsy. So we take our biopsy and we make sure you're okay, and then we send this little teeny tiny piece of tissue, sometimes tinier than you wish.
Yeah, I never complain. But
and then Dr. Gapp works this incredible magic on it. He freezes it, he feeds it, he stains it, he puts all little magic wands on it, and it in response, it will give you information about how active it is, if it likes to travel along arteries, if it likes to travel along nerves. It can even tell, Dr. Gapp can come back and tell us how strong your response is to that cancer. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Okay, yeah, so like we were talking about before, there's all sorts of different types of cancers, and cancers are kind of like wind. They're named from whence they came, and so depending on the cell type that the cancer comes from is usually the name that's given to the cancer. I guess maybe not always, but usually. And so in skin cancer, you have two broad categories of skin cancer. You have melanoma skin cancer and non-melanoma skin cancer. And it's an important distinction because the melanoma skin cancer, so when you say melanoma, you have that mellow part at the beginning, kind of like melanocytes and melanin. It's the pigmented skin cancer. So and that's the one that I think most people usually think of because that's the deadly one. That's the one that
it's a bad one.
Right. Fortunately, it's not nearly as common as non-melanoma skin cancer, which I'll get to in a second. But so the melanoma skin cancer comes from the melanocyte, which is the cell that makes the melanin pigment in the skin. And the
Gives me a tan, and I've
Right.
lost it here. Yeah.
It's probably a little vitiligo.
Right.
Yeah, and so the melanin is the pigment in your skin that gives your skin the color that you have. And so if you're pasty white, you don't have a lot of melanin. If you're much darker, you got a lot of melanin. And that's really the only difference in skin color. It's not even the difference in the number of melanocytes or anything else. It's just how much melanin pigment do your melanocytes make. Which is really interesting because everything else, underneath the microscope looks exactly the same. It's just a difference in how much melanin is there. But melanoma comes from those cells. Melanoma comes from the cells that make the pigment. And your body actually makes, at least this is our current theory, which sounds correct to me, but our body makes melanin. The whole purpose of the pigment in the first place, it's a built-in sunscreen. It's a way to protect your skin from the dangers of UV radiation from sunlight. And so people who traditionally live in areas that get more intense sunlight tend to be a little bit darker skinned than people who live in areas that get less sunlight. They tend to be lighter skinned. And sunlight's also important for making vitamin D, and so your body is in this this battle between getting enough sunlight to make vitamin D, but not so much sunlight that it's going to cause other cancers. And so the melanin, or the other cancer, we talked, there's two types. There's the melanoma skin cancers and there's the non-melanoma skin cancers. The non-melanoma skin cancers usually come from getting too much of that UV radiation from the sun. And so the two major types, and really they make up 99% of the non-melanoma skin cancers, are basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. And basal cell carcinoma actually, I think, is the most common cancer, period. So skin cancer is the most common type of cancer. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common type of cancer, period, because it's the most common type of skin cancer.
And it's not nearly generally as bad as
Right. So both basal cell and squamous cell, you cut them out and they tend to be gone. I mean, there's always an exception to the rule, and so I don't want to make universal statements, but the wonderful thing about skin cancer is that when you catch it early, you can usually cure it, by simple excision. You don't usually have to do fancy treatments or anything like that. Simple excision, you cut it out and it's gone. You get clear margins and it's gone. And that's even true with melanoma, and we can get into that, if we'd like. But especially with basal cell and squamous cell, you cut it out and it's gone. Rarely will they metastasize or do worse things. And
that's really because early detection. Well, most cancer is early detection, getting ahead of that 8 ball, making then if you get it treated, it will not impact your quality of life.
Yeah.
Certainly, in good cases, it will not impact your appearance, and you're blessed. You'll just go on. How is that early detection facilitated?
So the wonderful thing about skin is you can see your skin. You don't need some fancy imaging equipment or anything like that. You don't have to go, get a colonoscopy. Right? Well, I guess some of us need some fancy imaging equipment, but beyond that, you don't have to go to a CT scan or anything like that. Every day you can just look at your skin. And so early detection of skin cancer is kind of as simple as paying attention to the way that your skin looks, and if you see something funny on your skin, going and getting it checked out. And it's usually, if you catch it if you notice the change right away, almost universally, that cancer is going to be able to be cured, if it's a cancer, is going to be able to be cured by simple excision, almost universally. And so skin exams are really important, both self skin exams and having your physician or your healthcare provider doing a skin exam on you, or your partner in life, because there are spots that you can't necessarily see very well, and so it's just important to
bits and pieces.
Right, exactly. So and the things that you want to pay attention to, is anything that changes. If you have a new spot on your skin that wasn't there before, it's something to pay attention. Now, sometimes it's a bug bite, and it'll go away in a week, and you don't have to worry about it. So you don't necessarily, if you get a bug bite, have to run to the doctor right away, but pay attention to it. If you get a new spot on your skin and it keeps growing or it keeps changing and it doesn't get better over a very short period of time, well, then you should probably have it go checked out. And the things that you kind of want to look for, I kind of this is kind of funny. When I look under the microscope, I don't know if this is just speculation on my part, but I think that if I were to take pictures of cancer cells and not cancer cells, and just show them to the random public and say, which is pretty and which is ugly, I bet you 80% of the time, the public will choose ugly for the cancer and pretty for the non-cancer. And it's that way when you're looking at your skin. If you see something on your skin and it's symmetric, it's well circumscribed, it's small, it's evenly colored, it's probably benign and you don't need to worry about it. But if you see something on your skin that's funny looking, and it's really as simple as being funny looking, it's probably worth having checked out. And funny looking is, it's irregular, it's got funny colors or it's more than one color, it's got a funny texture to it. It's not sharply demarcated from edge to edge, so it kind of trails off or trickles off. Those are warning signs. Those are reasons to have something checked out.
So. Absolutely. And so when we take our biopsy and we send it to you, are you able to tell how cancer grows, how deep it is? Does it matter?
Yeah. So those are great questions. And it depends on what type of cancer it is. So getting back to the two categories, the melanoma, the non-melanoma, really there's the melanoma, and in the non-melanoma category, it's the squamous cell and the basal cell. Those are the two types. There's a couple other more rare types of cancers in the non-melanoma type that are rare enough that it's we deal with those on a case by case basis when they show up. With both, especially with melanoma and even with squamous cell, how deep the cancer goes into the skin is important. How wide the cancer is important. In basal cell, it's important too, but basal cell it's more important we don't actually stage the basal cells that way. It's more important just to know when you go to treat it, how deep do you need to make your excision and how wide do you need to make your excision, and that's something that the clinician can often. Basal cell happens to be pretty visible, clinically. What you see when you look at it clinically tends to be what it looks like under the microscope as well. So that one's an easy one to get the margin control around. But the melanoma and even sometimes the squamous cell, they can kind of keep on trickling on, and that's where seeing those edges and how wide it is can make a difference with your clinician when they go to treat it.
That does take time, right? So sometimes you can get a pretty good answer of whether or not you've gotten all the cancer out. Sometimes it takes a little bit of extra time or special treatment to make sure that you've gotten all the cancer out.
Yeah. The way the process kind of ordinarily works is first you look at your skin and you say, oh geez, this spot here looks funny, and then you go to your doctor. And then your doctor looks at your skin and they say, oh geez, yeah, that spot looks funny. I'm a little worried about it. We need to do a biopsy. And so they don't usually do a full excision at that point because they don't know if it's, they might be suspicious about it, but they don't know for sure if it's benign or malignant, good or bad. And so they'll do a biopsy at that point just to kind of take a small piece. Like you said, they try to take a small piece, sometimes smaller than what I'd like, but a small piece. And then they'll give that to me. And in my laboratory, we will take that tissue and we'll, it's actually a really neat process. I'd love to show people the laboratory because it's a very human process. There's a human being touching the tissue at every spot. And people outside of the laboratory world kind of think of the lab as a black box. You put tissue in and you get answer out. But I got a lot of really talented people that work with me to actually get those answers. And so I love to show off the laboratory when I get the chance. But what we do is we take that biopsy, that little tissue sample, And we gross it in, and all that it is measuring it, describing it, putting it into a cassette to be processed. Then we put it into a machine, and that usually takes overnight. It's you put it into the machine, and you put it in at like 8 o'clock at night, and by 6 in the morning, the machine, we call it a tissue processor, draws the water out of the tissue. It fixes the tissue, so it permanently fixes the tissue, so it won't degrade anymore, and it embeds the tissue with wax, so it puts wax into the tissue, and that allows us then to take that processed piece of tissue and embed it into a wax block. We actually call it a tissue block, but and it's just a little a 1x1 square of wax the tissue is embedded in. And then my techs and it's a human who does this, and then my techs will take that block and they will cut thin little, like 5 micron slices off of that block. And I mean, they're paper thin, you can barely see them, and they'll put them onto a glass slide, and then we'll take that glass slide and we'll put it through a series of stains so that we can actually see it under the microscope. And then once it's stained, I look at it under the microscope and am able to then evaluate the microscopic anatomy of what this original biopsy was, and that's how we eventually get to the answer. What was this spot? If it's a tumor, so say that this was a pigmented spot. So if it's a tumor, and all tumor means is just growth. So tumor isn't really a good word or a bad word. It just means growth. You can have benign tumors and you can have malignant tumors. But if it's a melanocytic lesion, if it's the melanocytes that are growing, it might just be a little benign nevus, a mole like everybody gets, or it might be melanoma. And then I'm able to make that determination at that point. So
I think that's wonderful. So there you have it, which I love. We have kind of like the CSI of medicine here, which is fascinating, and all of the information that a CSI doctor can get from a small piece of tissue. But what I really love about talking with you today is how much common sense and love that you apply to your discipline, because it really is nice to have common sense.
Yeah, it's overlooked. It's like,
Common sense. So there you have it. Thank you so much, Dr. Gapp, for joining us today. We may see you on the Hill in Washington.
That we are fighting for that. So
until such time, how can we contact you?
So as far as the laboratory goes, my laboratory is Knoxville Dermatopathology Laboratory. It's kind of a mouthful, KDL for short. It's easier to say KDL. And you can visit us at kdlpathology.com for our website. We're at 315 Aaron Drive. We don't usually get patients coming to our door, but we're happy to talk to anybody and answer any questions that we can. As far as if you're interested in helping get a physician into the United States Senate, visit joshgapp.com. It's our campaign website. Healthcare is, and we've talked about this in a little bit, but off camera. But healthcare is tremendously important to me, and the future of healthcare is tremendously important to me. If your audience remembers anything from this interview, remember 3 and 47. Right now, there are 3 doctors and 47 lawyers in the United States Senate. And these are the people that are making your healthcare policy decisions. We need people up there who know what they're doing and have been on the front line and understand what it's like to actually lay healing hands on a patient when making these decisions.
I love that, because let's maybe think about developing a time where we can talk about how doctors have that unique perspective of what patients need, how to run a business, and how do we get healthcare better in the United States?
I would love to talk about that.
Okay.
Those are issues that are near and dear to my heart.
Okay,
so.
well, we will then. And thank you for joining us today, and that's a wrap.
This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.